Hello, everybody, and welcome to Max League of Nations 2. We are on to the second part of competitions. After a fierce couple of weeks of competition between various countries, we have just a handful of countries left into the final stages of this tournament. My name is Clark Hellscream, and I'm joined today by McBanterFace. Banter, how are you feeling on the caster chair today?
I'm feeling great. I think it's going to be a really good match. Two very strong teams with quite a few notable players between them, and I think it'll be a good one.
Yeah, I think this is going to be an insanely good match too. And luckily, with the announcement of new cards, if you're someone who really enjoys this meta, then this is probably going to be something you'll tend to miss here in a couple of weeks, because even after having a new balance patch, we are already getting some brand new cards, which I'm just going to go ahead and say that this will delay next week's stream just so we give our players enough time in order to actually prepare properly. But with that out of the way, we're going to be enjoying Alterac Valley pre-mini set, but for just one more week. But let's go ahead and talk about the players that we're seeing today. We have South Korea versus Sweden. You have any comments on these players, Big Banterface? I bet you probably played a lot of them in high stakes matches before.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think nearly all of them I probably played in some sort of tournament, whether it's an Open Cup, maybe like a weekly tournament or a Master Tour. A lot of them have been around for, pretty much forever in the Hearthstone scene. So there's a lot of competitive experience between them. Some of them are maybe a little bit newer to the scene and kind of up-and-comers. But either way, I think it's going to be a very tightly contested match.
Yeah, and as far as this group is concerned, we have a couple of groups. We have Group D that we're going to be showing for you guys today, which does contain Sweden and South Korea. But if depending on how the rest of these countries perform, there's also Brazil, Czech Republic, Italy, as well as China to worry about in this group. So win or lose, you're going to have some pretty strong players regardless. But let's go ahead and go into the matchups for this particular event, because we've got some pretty standard lineups. But McBanter, do you want to take the first lineup from Gur?
Sure. So looking at Gur's lineup, they brought the kind of Mizaki Mage, pretty standard, even post-nerf, Libram Paladin, as well as Miracle Priest. And then on the other side, Orange brought the Burn Shaman, Libram Paladin as well, and Weapon Rogue. And between those two lineups, the Gur's Mage was banned, and Orange's Weapon Rogue was banned.
Yeah, so Weapon Rogue and Mozaki Mage still pretty dominant decks in the meta, even though that the decks have been nerfed. But like, these combo decks are just way too efficient, way too I don't want to say the word proactive, but it feels like these combo decks are very proactive nowadays, where like they really don't have to play in a controlling way. You can just do your thing and just absolutely dominate with them. But although I am happy to see that Orange is bringing the Freeze Shaman, I will let you guys know that Orange was thinking that this match was 12 hours before it actually was. So his sleep schedule is a little bit all over the place. We may not see the most solid Shaman gameplay, because I believe this is probably one of the most difficult decks in this current expansion at the moment through this balance patch. But I'm really looking forward to some insane gameplay from the Shaman side of Orange, because his Rogue is banned, and we don't have to worry about Shaman getting banned.
Yeah, it's one of the newer decks in the meta, and a lot of counting involved, so they're going to need to be at the top of their game. It is pretty late for them, but hopefully they'll still be able to manage on some of those tougher turns.
Yeah, and then on the other side, we just have straightforward Libram Paladin. I think that this deck is it's just been the go-to for a lot of people, because it feels like it's the only tempo deck that can actually commit minions, have it stick, and then use them meaningfully. Paladin just always has this special power of just always being able to find at least one playable deck, and then the rest of it is just it's kind of good. Buff Paladin, I think, is a little bit fringe here, but it's pretty much what we've come to expect from the Paladin side of things. Looking back over to Chewy's lineup, though, he does have the Priest. So Priest might lead to some pretty interesting gameplay here, depending on what happens with the random generation. But do you imagine that there's one matchup in particular that's going to be a little bit difficult for either side?
I mean, I think it's an interesting matchup spread. I actually think a lot of these matchups are fairly even, and I think this is a series that could very well come down to just a Paladin mirror. And interestingly, there's a slight difference between the Paladin lists, where Gur went with a more greedy list, with Mr. Smite and Mutinous as some of the top end. whereas Orange has just 2 Trogs in there, which are missing from Gur's list. So it'll be interesting to see if those cards end up, making a big difference within the context of this matchup.
And speaking of which, it looks like we're able to get a beginning Paladin mirror, as you predicted, by the way. So just like that, McBanterFace is already proving that being a caster really isn't that hard when you can just predict the future. But in terms of mulligans, Orange does have the Trog ready to go on turn 1 against the coin. So that seems like a really good start. While on the opposite side, Gur does have his Libram discount. So he doesn't have the 1-drop, but he does have that really important 5-drop in order to get as much cheat as possible. And now he does find the Allior Attendant, so you have almost every single one of your Libram cards being discounted very, very effectively. So Orange is going to be on the play here, play Trog as per usual. Not going to be too surprised to see Gur throw down the Allior Attendant, but the rest of this game is going to be pretty different than this usual turn 1.
Yeah, I mean, both of these hands are really strong in their own ways. Gur has a much more kind of long-term plan with these Aldor Attendants, discounting this Libram of Hope down by 3 with the Attendant and the Truth Seeker. But meanwhile, Orange has pretty much the dream starting hand for Paladin. Turn 1 Trog, turn 2 Noble Mount creates an incredibly sticky minion that can be pretty hard to get rid of.
Yeah, the curve can be sometimes a Paladin's worst nightmare when all they have are their Libram cards. And kind of like what you're saying, we are seeing 2 different styles of gameplay right now. One more combo, proactive gameplay to help, the rest of the turns feel better, versus just good old-fashioned Curve Stone. And honestly, this Curve Stone into Noble Mount to give the Trog Divine Shield as well as a +1/+1 buff seems like a pretty good way to just, cement just how good Curve Stone used to be back then. It still kind of is now.
Yeah, and already kind of a decision for Orange about whether they want to, presumably Noble Mount will come down this turn. I think the big question is, are we going face with it? Are you going to bump? I think, one of the lines you can look at here is bumping into the Aldor Attendant and then putting the Noble Mount on, because you get to keep the Divine Shield, which can be better in case, the Aldor Attendant does end up getting buffed, which they do go with.
Yeah, this is a pretty good play. I'm not gonna lie, I am very basic when it comes to my Paladin play, and I was just thinking, just put on Divine Shield, hit face. Why do we need to trade into the 1/3? But HP is very, very real in the Paladin matchups, especially with all the amount of buffs that they have. The last thing that you want is a trade to leave up a minion at 1 HP, because then you have to, as a Paladin, attack into it again, and it's like the minion is getting twice the amount of attacks, twice the amount of value. That's the last thing that you definitely want, you cannot afford in a Paladin mirror, where every single HP can make a difference.
Yep, absolutely. And so because of that, Orange has pretty dominant board presence as of now, and it's kind of, making Gur never want to use the coin. Luckily, for Gur, his hand is pretty top heavy anyway, and they'll likely be looking at something like Coin Aldor Truthseeker later on, so it's not particularly disruptive, but Orange will certainly try and snowball this lead into more board pressure.
Pretty weak value from the Alliance Bannerman, but I don't really see a better option here. Like, you could go for like Knight of the Anointment into like a buff, but it kind of seems a little bit unnecessary. Just drawing the minions seems to be like the best use of this turn, in my opinion, just so that way you can hopefully get some more pressure onto the field. Because right now, Orange is kind of falling behind on resources as he's playing the curve option, while Gur is just, kind of waiting for his game plan to finally get the Libram discounted so he can have the board. But, I mean, right now, he's not. It doesn't really seem like he's missing out on a whole lot by not having the early game. But if this Trog doesn't get dealt with, I don't think it's going to become game-winning, but it's certainly going to become annoying.
Yep, it is definitely a nuisance. And, on Orange's side, he did pick up a second Bannerman from the first one, which is one of the better minions you could draw at that stage, because now, you draw another minion this turn, and suddenly it actually has a decent bit of value. I'm sure we'll see the second one come down, and at this point, they're just looking really for, like, Aldor Truthseeker to get the Libram discounts rolling.
Yeah, I got the 3/3 Knight of the Anointment, pretty good for the board. Luckily, Gur doesn't have the Samaro in hand, so, like, AoE is kind of lacking at the moment. There is a Barav currently in hand, but I don't think... Yeah, okay, so Gerd does run 2 copies of Animated Broomstick. I was looking at differences in the list, and they both run Broom, so that rush possibility is still there. But unfortunately for Gur, I was kind of talking about how he has like a lot of these resources ready to go, but he may not have the time in order to actually commit some of these cards. Like, he's just got a very high mana cost hand, while Orange has just got, you know, high minion pressure, which is a lot more impactful at this stage of the game.
Yep, absolutely. And, you know, now already, finally the Trog is off the board, which means Gur can very happily coin out the Eldar Truthseeker. One of the strongest plays you can make with this deck in general, and when you're not summoning extra Trogs, it feels a whole lot better.
Oh, and now he draws the Eldar Truthseeker right off the top. So, like, now he's got the Libram discounts, so he's kind of ahead in almost every single aspect now in terms of having, except for card draw, I guess, but, like, you have the board, you have the Libram discounts, and honestly, with this Stonehearth Vindicator, you are getting the card draw better than your opponent. Yep. So, yeah, Gur's just kind of just falling behind in literally every aspect of the game right now. Kind of unfortunate.
Yep, and definitely like the start of this turn from Orange. You know, the much simpler play that, you know, somebody might make is just, well, I drew Aldor on 5, let's just play it. But you end up kind of relinquishing a little bit of board control. You don't even have a Libram in hand at that point, or at least a Libram of Wisdom that you're getting any value off of. So I like going for the Vindicator a lot, just getting the card draw. We're pretty likely, I think, to see a Hand of Vidal, maybe on a, you know, Divine Shield minion here, and just try to keep the board. And with the way the hand works out, they can just play the Aldor next turn, and they'll be able to curve into a Libram of Hope on turn 7. Yeah,
that's I think that's the biggest reason why you want to hold off on this, because like it's not that the Aldor is bad, it's that the Stonehearth Vindicator kind of gets worse as time goes on. So you might as well just commit it now before like any Liadrin combos can come out. You know that like Samoro and Barav are the only way that your opponents can clear. So just not playing into like a potential Barav with like your giant taunt with a decent amount of HP makes a lot of sense. So I think that's a good spot there, McBanter.
Yep, and they also do choose to, you know, put all the buffs onto this Knight of Anointment, which has become pretty big in the last few turns with all these buffs, and actually manages to take a value trade on the Aldor. And I mean, looking at Gur's hand, there's just not much going on. It's incredibly expensive. You know, all these cards you're never going to have time really to play unless you can get control of the board. Bannerman's pretty much the only real option here, and I think at this point they're kind of just looking for a Broom or maybe a Samuro to try and deal with some of this board.
Yeah, no Samuro left, unfortunately. There's just so much mana available in Gur's hand. This is looking very it's just looking really bad. I was trying to come up with like a fancy, funny way to describe this, but this is just the classic feeling of one person's playing Hearthstone and the other person just has to wait for the perfect card to finally have their chance to play Hearthstone. And right now, that perfect card is definitely the Broom. While on the other side, Orange has all of the options at the moment. Draw some cards, discount some Librams. Now he has 2 Libram of Wisdoms in the hand, so I don't think there's any reason we don't commit the Alador here. Is there ever a scare of like, he's got the Barav, I just don't play it? Or is it just because you need the discounts that badly? What are you thinking, McBanter?
Yeah. Well, in general, I mean, you don't really want to overcommit, but in this case, playing the Aldor isn't really overcommitting because you are discounting the cards. You know, there's a Libram of Wisdom on this Knight of Anointment and another one in hand, as well as a Hope for refill. So I think there's zero concerns about overcommitting here. You're just always going to spend the mana, and they're going to continue to just push a crazy amount of damage here. It's got to be looking pretty scary from Gur's point of view.
Yeah, Paladin had a massive amount of healing that didn't just took over. They did just take your entire turn and play into the opponent's board. Then maybe Gur would have a better play here, because just playing Libram of Hope is really not helping. If anything, it's just putting a band-aid on a fatally on a mortally wound, on a very big wound. I'm sorry, but like it's just there's not really a lot that you can do with that top deck of what the Knight of the Anointment. There's just very little that Gur has control of right now. Oh, I'm sorry, Aldor Attendant. That's not really much better, but at least you can play a 1/3 in addition to your Libram of Hope, but it's just all you can do is just stall.
Yep, it does, you know, give you at least a little bit of extra discounts on the next one as well, but at this point, I mean, all this damage is getting left up on board. They were really hoping for a Broom draw at this point, I'd say, and even then, they're pretty far behind.
Yeah, feels a little rough watching this game, to be honest. This is one reason why I feel like a lot of people just don't like mirror matches. But like, this is probably one of the most textbook definitions of like uneventful mirror matches, where just one person gets the tempo, the other person kind of gets all their more expensive cards. But regardless, Liadrin with all of the Librams, you have Hand of Adal to buff, which probably is the worst play here, but there are a lot of options here. What are you thinking here? Because this is one of those games to where it's pretty difficult to lose from, but there are ways to throw away unnecessary percentages. So what is your line of thinking here in this situation?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing that I imagine they might be doing this spot is checking if there's any sort of lethal. You know, sometimes you can get a lethal with, if you've played enough Libram of Wisdoms by this point, you played, you know, enough Hand of Adals, whatever, you can maybe get a lethal with these Librams. I'm not quite sure if this is, it looks like they're looking for one. I think this is still a little bit off. However, they're just generating these extra. Yeah, it looks like a defensive stuff. Yep, and I think the Liadrin here is, you know, makes a lot of sense. You could always obviously opt for the Libram of Hope and just get the Divine Shield on board. That is probably quite a bit weaker to a clear, and it's something they might be hedging around here. If, you know, there is a Barov Broom on the other side, they might be feeling like that's pretty much the only way they can lose from here. So just generating some extra Librams in the meantime and saving that Divine Shield makes a lot of sense. And the Broom is picked up for Gur. It feels like it might be a little too late at this point, but it does at the very least allow for a board clear here. I don't think there are any noble mounted minions, so they can use that to clear the board, but the question is, where do you really go from there?
The thing that really sucks about this play is the fact that we have the Barov clear, but we have literally nothing else that we can do with the rest of our turn. So like, we're clearing the board just to leave ourselves alone on the field with a 1/1 at 30 HP. This does not feel like a win.
Absolutely not. And I mean, I'm sure, you know, if you had any options, you would much prefer to make like a Libram Hope Broom play, but here it just leaves you dead on board. There's too many minions, too much pressure, so you're just forced to make this play at this point.
You have the hero power being the only minion that you can threaten with. Orange just has a lot of resources available still in hand to pressure onto the board. Maybe there's I was actually wondering if there was a way of hero power, if we can maybe keep a minion alive, but there's just not enough minions on the board in order for that to work out. That really doesn't help us out in any shape, way. There's just no way it helps us out anyway. But Gur finally has control of this game on turn 8 at 3 HP, and Orange is finally off the board for the first time this entire game.
Yep, the board has finally been taken away, but the initiative is still on Orange's side. Of course, with 8 mana to spend here, Libram of Hope in hand, Trogs, Noble Mounts, you've got a lot of options here. And really, you're just kind of trying to stick a minion at this point to, you know, push for lethal damage.
Is there ever a world where we don't play Libram of Hope here? Just because the minion is just way too good? Like, the first, like, as a basic Libram Paladin player, the first thing that my brain goes to is just play the Libram, make it really big. You can maybe play a 1-drop behind it. Maybe you play the 1-drop and give it some buffs so it's not just sitting there awkwardly next to like a 12/12. But
right. Yeah, I mean, you can definitely consider, you know, trying to go wide in a spot like this. The thing is, with their hand right now, there's not really too many options. You know, they have a Trog and this Libram, or Libram Hope. I think at this point you just make the strongest on-board play, because you know this is pretty hard to answer. They've already used one Broom. There's no Barov, so it's pretty unlikely they have a clean answer to this Divine Shield minion.
Yeah, you do at least need to give a few buffs to your Libram of Hope card just in case your opponent does happen to play that themselves, because then you have a pretty easy trade. And like, the most important thing with the Libram of Hope minions is not necessarily like trading the Divine Shield into each other, but like trading a 9/9 to an 8/8, kind of like what I was saying earlier, where like if a minion survives at 1 HP, specifically in Paladin matchups, that is like your worst nightmare. One of your worst nightmares for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, Gur's just looking for any way to stay alive at this point, and it looks pretty hard. Looks like it's going to be tough to find one, particularly with a Broom in hand from Orange, which of course they don't know about. I think at this stage you kind of just need to put up the most, you know, kind of defense that you can. Here I'm looking at something like Aldor Trueseeker into Libram of Hope. You have 2 taunts, you have some Divine Shields, maybe it keeps you alive for a turn, and then gives you some, you know, potential outs on your next turn.
Oh yeah, the Aldor Trueseeker coming down in order to get the Trog a little bit, but ultimately compared to the Trog, it's nothing that Gur really is worrying about. The 1-2 going into the Divine Shield though does kind of make a small difference, but I don't think that there's no lethal here, right?
I just visually, especially with the Carriel draw plus all the minions in hand and broom, I have to imagine there is. It's I'm sure they'll take a minute to search for one. Just visually, it looks like lethal. You know, you have Carriel, a couple buffs, and of course you have the wisdoms within the Trog that they just traded off, so they can use those on minions that they play here to just buff them up and get through the Divine Shield.
Yeah, and then you have you have the broom as well. Wait, is this lethal? Can you get that to
They might. Yeah, so you can also weave in the hero power with. Yeah. Yep, and so they will be buffing this. Yes, this is now enough, especially with the discounted Hand of Adals in hand from the Carriel attack. They're able to push through and land one Wisdom onto the, or even a Hand of Adal onto the Divine Shield. Very nicely executed.
That's exactly why I'm in the casters, I don't know if I would have been able to have found him. Oh wait! Okay, for a second I thought he was 1 damage off of that, so yeah, luckily this is just enough right when the road is about to get completed. Orange gets the first win in the Paladin mirror, and honestly, like, this was very much in his favor, I do have to say, because like he just had all of the necessary tempo tools. But the biggest thing that I really want to point out is just the fact that like right when Gur finally started pulling it around, I think that was the only draw that guaranteed Orange that lethal there, if he was able to see it, of course. But just well executed by Orange, and you gotta feel for Gur after that series.
Yep, very well played by Orange and Team Sweden in that game. They had the initiative from basically turn 1, and they managed to carry it through the game pretty well. And they're gonna look to do the exact same thing again in this game. Pretty similar opener.
Yeah. So oh my god. So the Trog is still available on the turn 1 for Orange. That's just not fair whatsoever. We're going up against, a deck that only plays spells, but like luckily for Gur, he is playing a decent amount of silence, so I don't think that Trog is going to like steal this game away or anything like that. But it definitely doesn't help you that you need that silence now from the very beginning of this game.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Miracle Priest definitely has some ways to deal with Libram Paladin, especially with all the buffs they have, because you do run, pretty much every list runs the double Shard Linaru, which could very well end up being very impactful in this game. And, looking at the mulligans, I think they're going to be looking at that card as something that they either definitely want now or at least will want in the near future. Other than that, I think we're looking for Insight, we're looking for Palm Reading. They do choose to ditch the Shard for now. It is quite likely you'll draw into it later, and it's not one of your stronger cards. But Orange will open up with the Trog.
Yeah, this is just like... This is where I don't really know what to say for like the Priest, other than like you just have to get your Nazmani combo, because like every other card that you're going to play is just going to benefit your opponent to a degree.
Yeah, perfect top deck.
It really sucks.
But, I mean, Gur's hand is coming along quite nicely. You will end up taking quite a bit of chip from the Trogs, but your deck has plenty of healing. Zyrella clear is possible later on, the silence that we already talked about. And the palm reading pickup is definitely a big deal. It's one of the ways you can activate your Nazmani combos. But the hand itself right now is still, lacking a little bit of something. A Gift of Luminance would be something they really want to discount to be able to create some sort of pop-off turn.
Is there any dragon that can help us out at all? My first thought is no, because there's way too many high-cost dragons.
Yeah, I mean, not only that, but you don't want to give them an extra Trog now, at least not with a card that's kind of unimportant, like Draconic Studies at the moment, and generally you're going to be looking to use it on your discount turn anyway, so they're going to eventually play Palm Reading within the next few turns, and then they can play a 0-mana Studies with the Blood Weavers to just discount the rest of their hand.
Not even hero powering? Okay, so this has to be a clear... Like, the only reason that we would do this is to set up for a Zyrella clear.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is really interesting because it's almost like there's some mind games going on, I think, because when you see this from Orange's point of view and Team Sweden's point of view, you're immediately thinking about stuff like Xyrella and maybe Gift of the Naru as well as being something that's kind of relevant, but mostly the Xyrella clear that becomes a potential concern. So that might end up, kind of being part of their thinking in the next few turns. So I'm kind of surprised to see no hero power there, because I think you're expecting to take a decent bit of chip in the next few turns. So I don't know if I would necessarily make the same play, but I think it's a very interesting one.
True strength comes from
And
fear.
Orange really doesn't have too many complicated situations here. Like, this is just why people prefer playing Paladin over Priest sometimes, because who needs to think about 16 different options before it's even turn 2?
Yeah, and the Hand of a Doll picked up off of the Vindicator pretty good. It just allows you to cycle, and the Trog keeps on going.
Yeah, Trog is not going anywhere.
There is a shard picked up from Gur, and again, I think they're kind of close to having a pretty solid turn. I think what's missing is just the Gift of Luminance at this point to and some actual payoff, which means they're going to need to at some point play this palm reading and thrive, but they're taking a lot of damage in the meantime.
Yeah, I was wondering if going for palm reading would be the way here. Giving the opponent another Trog doesn't really seem that bad because you're hopefully enacting your game plan. But the other issue with this, like you said, without the Gift of Luminance, it doesn't really feel like we're meaningfully contributing to our next couple of turns in the future. It just feels like we're scrounging for plays this turn to figure out if maybe we can find something in the next couple of turns. But he does just play the Silence, okay. And he finds that Gift of Luminance, perfect.
Yeah, I like this a lot because I think when you look at the context of the rest of the hand, if you play a palm reading in that spot, you're really just not discounting much, right? You're discounting a Studies, you're discounting a Shard, and you're discounting a Thrive, but you're also giving your opponent more damage on board, and you don't have any sort of Xyrella in hand to look forward to. So I think this is a very sensible choice. You're also trying to make, more important discounts with your palm reading and try to set up for maybe a 2-turn or 3-turn plan to start to get these Nazmanis going.
Yeah, I think I would definitely agree with the results of this play. Luckily, I should say, unluckily for me, I don't have the foresight in order to see clearly what Gur is seeing, because this is probably the best way to recover from this particular situation. Because now that he's got the value, and he does have the Malagos in hand, which usually isn't that good by turn 4, turn 5, but unless you're playing Priest or Malagos, it's a premium card to have this early in the game in order to help set up these combos.
Yep. And I mean, in general, when you have a palm reading in hand and you draw a minion, you're often not going to be that happy. Here, I think they'll be perfectly happy to see this Mally drawn, because it means they can start to set up, that big payoff turn. They finally have the payoff. They have some discounts now, although not many, but there are still a few. And they're going to start to look forward to that combo turn.
Yeah, and looking at these Discovers, like, the first thing that comes to my mind is that as much as I like Soul Mirror as a card, I don't think that we can keep it in hand because it's just going to eat way too many discounts. Going with the Apotheosis just seems significantly better in order to hopefully get this gigantic Mally turn that we're probably going to need next turn if we have any chance. If Gur has any chance of being able to keep the flag being raised for South Korea. But he is sitting at a very low life total.
Yep, picking up a cheaper card as well as one that can be very relevant. Like you said, the health total is a thing, and they are going to start going in here. They said it's time. They're getting pretty low, and Nazmani Gift, always good start to the turn. And now we're just going to look at trying to get this Mally or this third Nazmani on the board.
Yeah, so the Draconic Studies is going to be a key player in being able to discount this Mally, but we don't want to play it first for the fact that it'll give us another big dragon in our hand. And
yeah.
I don't think he's actually going to be able to play that Mally unless he gets extremely lucky with the Draconic Studies only hitting the Mally.
You actually only need to hit it twice here out of the 3 because you discount it with the Studies as well. So they just need 2 hits onto this Mally. They might end up taking another one. Maybe Ysera is another option here.
Like
and if they get 2 of the hits, then that is a huge deal. Oh, and they do not.
Oh, no.
I mean, yeah, that's got to feel kind of brutal. There is still a board they have to deal with and a 1-mana Mally in hand, which is pretty relevant, but certainly not what they were hoping for.
Yeah, like the biggest thing that just really sucks about that, outside of not getting all the draw and all the discounts this turn, is the fact that it just gives Orange an opportunity to remove some of these Nazmanis if he does believe that a Mali could come out, and I feel like it's a safe thing to play around, getting rid of the mana reduction, because that's just how the Priest wins the game to begin with. And now that they only have so many cards left in hand, like, it just feels like you want to remove them off the field, because we're not setting up a meaningful lethal if we just storm this all to the face. I feel like we have to do our best to either remove everything or the most amount as possible. And honestly, there might be a way to do it with this Hand of a Doll drawn.
Yeah, I mean,
like
they absolutely do have to remove some of this board, and if they were checking the palm reading then on the turn that it was played, they will actually know that the far left card in that hand is another minion, meaning it could only really be Xyrella or Mali. And I think given the way that last turn panned out, it's a pretty sensible lead that there is a very cheap Malygos in hand.
Yeah, Orange is picking up on that read, getting rid of every single mana discount available, so you have your card draw, but you don't have your mana cheat. So you're really gonna have to make use of the cards that you're given. Okay, so Gur does have a lot of very good resources to fight Paladin left in his deck still. He has a lot of Random Discover. He still has Shadow Word Devour, which isn't necessarily that insane, but if you combo it with some of the removal that you can find randomly, it can make a big difference. The big point here is that we're drawing a decent third of our deck, and that's just very powerful in and on its own. And with a Psychic Split, you can make two very large Malygoses, or Malagese.
You could absolutely. I think Malagese, I think, yeah. And the big question from Gur's point of view here is, how much do you commit to this? Because, you know, you want to make sure you don't get completely blown out by like a Barov, for instance. Here, there's 3 cards in hand at this point, not a huge read on Barov that they could have, so making the biggest board and trying to set up a lethal before giving them too many draws makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, so now Orange has to think about how can these Mallies end up killing me here, because a Devour into Bless play is more than enough with the 2 Malagese on the field. You have a Divine Shield Taunt that could be pretty decent, but... Oh wait, no, so both of the Charlanaras have been played, so you do have a chance, if you're Orange, to hide behind a Taunt right now.
Yes, I definitely think they will be looking at least one taunt, preferably one with a Divine Shield. I think will be a strong consideration, because they can have a decent idea of most of the cards in hand, or at least what could be in hand. They obviously don't draw all of their spells from the Mali, but you're probably going to expect, you know, a very likely Bless and at least one Shadow Word Devour here. And I do imagine we'll see a palm reading to start this turn. You've got a whole hand full of spells, and you can potentially, I believe, hit a lethal off of it at this point. Yeah, definitely. So, oh, Hysteria is interesting here, because you can Hysteria the Ancient Guardian, and I think this should end up probably being lethal. Yeah, I believe this is just lethal, right? You pick Hysteria, and then you can Shadow Word Devour first on one of your Mallies, buff it up, bless it, and it's just always going to connect face.
Yeah, I don't think there's much else really to say about this. This is just kind of what Miracle Priest has been known for, is just its ability of just suddenly out of nowhere going from I'm losing this game to how did I just lose the game? The Priest has a 35-35 Malygos on the field. How did I ever have a chance to begin? But Orange, his Paladin luck has finally been ended. He doesn't have to worry. He doesn't have to worry about the other Paladin. So if you're a Paladin hater, you're probably rejoicing right now. But at the same time, Paladin won twice, so I don't really. Oh, it did win once.
So yeah, the Paladin does fall. Very well played Miracle Priest game. I think just waiting until you have, you know, a proper hand to really go in on the combo, not playing the palm reading too early on, you know, somewhat useless discounts. Just a very efficient game overall. And to decide the series, we're now going to have that Miracle Priest Gur against Orange's Burn Shaman.
Yeah, so the winner of this will make it possible for Sweden or for South Korea to get the complete sweep. Last broadcast, I ended up only doing 2 matches because both players from the same team ended up winning. So I'm kind of hoping the same thing doesn't happen this time.
Me too. I wanna see all three of these sets. Hopefully some close sets. I think that's always what we're looking for, and the more games, the better.
Yeah, and if you're an Orange fan, I would definitely get out your notebook and start taking some very diligent notes because we've got probably, in my opinion, the most difficult deck to play on ladder at the moment, and it's mostly due to the fact that it's just got a lot of counting. There's just so much counting that's available in this Shaman deck that it has kind of rekindled my love for Burn Shaman this expansion.
Yeah, and ironically, there are 0 copies of Diligent Note Taker in Orange's deck.
Aw,
Perhaps
man.
just not a big fan of that card. I think this matchup is incredibly interesting, but look at this hand for Gur. I mean, this is pretty close to the dream hand. You've got Thrive in the Shadows and a Palm Reading from the Mulligan, both Nazmanis and a Gift of Luminance. We could be looking at a very early pop-off turn here. Wow. Those are good options too.
I want them all.
What would you, yeah, I know, right? If you had to pick one, what are you picking here?
Okay, so I feel like we have Palm Reading. We have to pick Insight, right? Because we want to get the Mally. Like, we literally have everything in our hand but the Mally, so anything that gives us the best chances of getting that. Insight's a 50-50. You either get Zarella or you get the most important card in your deck, so it just has to be the option.
Yep, absolutely. And I mean, even hitting, I'm sure they're definitely would prefer a Mally in this spot, but Zarella can still be pretty good. Sometimes you get pressured on board by Shaman, and already a very interesting pick for Orange here, whether he wants a more kind of tempo-oriented card, some card draw, or this Imprisoned Phoenix. This matchup can get pretty interesting, I think. It's one that I think can go either way, but Imprisoned Phoenix is one of those cards I think can make a big difference. If you have enough time to cycle through your deck, you can set up an OTK pretty, early on in the game, maybe as soon as turn 7.
Yeah, my tempo brain is telling me just to pick the Lady Vash, because like I like Phoenix when we're setting up combo, but by turn 3, it just feels like it's gonna be sitting in your hand. So maybe if you don't want to use the if you don't want to use the spell damage minion discount, maybe set up like a zapper turn if you want to go like all in on like landslides and stuff. But for tempo reasons and just being able to have attack on the field, I feel like the Vosh is just the best thing possible. But Orange is deciding to go for either the mana reduction out or going for combo later down the line. And this is why this deck is so much interesting to watch on people's streams, because when they talk about their thought process behind it, it really shows the lines that they're considering. But unfortunately, we don't have that commentary right now.
Yep, definitely an important choice there. And also from Gur's side now on this turn, just not playing the Palm Reading. Very sensible choice because you're not really looking at going in next turn anyway, and you can just get an extra discount by waiting one extra turn and going something like Palm Reading Insight to try and fish for that Mally. And the discount that you end up hitting on an extra card could very well be the difference.
Yeah, so this is
Serpentine
a little bit
Portal.
awkward for honestly on both sides.
Yeah.
Like Gur is just waiting for his combo. He still has to wait like 1 or 2 turns. So I guess Orange is in the more precarious predicament here because you don't
absolutely.
have combo at all.
If you had to ask me to pick between one of these two hands, I would definitely opt for this Priest hand right now. I think that Orange is just going to be looking for any sort of card draw. Multicaster will end up being a pretty huge deal. Having played all 3 spell types already, Multicaster could very well give them enough draw to get those macaws if they need to freeze the board for longer, and more importantly, get to a bunch of burn so that they can OTK them.
These are kind of meh options. I feel like the Raised Dead is the only good option because not only is it 0 mana so it doesn't steal discounts, but getting back your Nazmanis can be pretty important.
Yeah, if there's ever a world where they end up dying, which can happen if they're not particularly big and end up getting them like landslided away. Stormpike is a card that can work pretty well in this deck. I'm not sure if this is really a matchup where you would want it. It could put your Nazmanis out of range of a landslide, but other than that, a lot of the time you're kind of just expecting the Shaman to freeze your minions, so the health might not be as relevant, but it is what they opt for here.
Not playing the Insight though. I guess we want to use the Insight in addition to all the Nazmani discounts that we're gonna get, so I can understand that.
Yep, and they're just gonna hold on to an extra spell, perhaps as soon as next turn, going in with Nazmani Gift. They might not even be forced to, But you know, they are taking some damage here. There's 7 damage on board, so I would probably expect the next turn to be a big combo turn.
The one thing I don't like about not going for the insight this turn is what if we hit Zarella and we start popping off the combo? Like, we're getting all these discounts, but then we're not actually, you know, discounting what we need.
It's certainly not ideal. There is sort of the secondary plan of also Draconic Studies in hand, which you could hit a Mally off of. So I think it's still reasonable, but Orange, not a fun turn for him there. There's just nothing really in hand to do. You want to save the burn damage for your Phoenix turn, but there's no card draw, and all you really have is, you know, a Snowfall to look forward to if your opponent makes a board.
Something that I'm noticing from Orange's side is that he's not even like, I don't want to say that he's not playing cards, but he's just playing enough because he knows that this is the turn that's gonna, you know, dictate the rest of this game. But like just being able to save your resources for this potential gigantic pop-off turn, which we're now gonna see if the Mally does get added into hand.
Yep, I think like that will be a big turning point for those.
Yeah, just holding on to your resources so that way you can use them when they're more necessary versus just like committing all this burn when your opponent has healing. Like, I think this is just really good recognition from Orange, and I'm glad that I'm sitting here. Oh, he hit the Mally!
The Mally is found, and that will absolutely be coming down this turn. They are good. They've got to go here. I mean, they're looking to make a board. They are going to get pretty much their entire deck played this turn or something close to it. But you do have to be a little bit cautious here. You know, in a lot of matchups, this would just be game over. This is not one of them. You know, Snowfall Guardian can just block your entire board and lead to you being able to do nothing. So I'd like to see them hold some of these resources back and look for stuff like potentially the 1-mana Silence off of Discovers.
Yeah, the other
Alex
thing...
Straza picked up.
The other thing that's really important here is depending on the APM and if Gur got lost in the sauce, if he fills up his board and does play into the Guardian, it's really unfortunate. But Gur is no beginner, clearly. And now the pressure is really on Orange to figure out, okay, I had half my opponent's health gone last turn. He's back up to full HP, and there's like a bajillion HP and minions on the field. How do I set up the win here?
Yeah, I mean, and again, it's just the lack of card draw is killer here for Orange and Team Sweden. They have the Snowfall Guardian, but that's pretty much all that you have. They haven't been able to play the Phoenix because they just don't have enough burn or resources to make use of it. And now they're in a spot where they're pretty much guaranteed to die if they don't freeze these minions. So I think you're forced into a play where you just Snowfall here and hope that you hit, you know, like a Macaw off the top.
Yeah, I think I'm in the same boat as you. There's really no other way that I feel like we can meaningfully, you know, stall out the game to maybe find enough damage. And it's like, even though we have the Snowfall Guardian, it's like, what happens after that? Like, you have to hit Macaw and then maybe play your own Phoenix to set up like a combo. But it's just like, Gur is going to be able to set up the most disgusting board here this turn. He has all the time in the world now that he has all the animations from Mally that have finished.
Yeah, I mean, at best, you're kind of just forced to hope that your Snowfall sticks and actually connects face. Of course, we can see that is never going to happen with an Elec Mount in hand, Zyrella, Shard of the Naru, which can just silence it, but they really didn't have any other option there. Meanwhile, Gur is just cycling through these spells, looking probably for stuff that can, you know, have some sort of response to a Macaw. If you can silence your own minion, sometimes you can end up getting a kind of surprise lethal. In this case, they don't have any self-silence because there's only one card you can generate that does that. But I do imagine we'll at the very least be playing an Elec Mount this turn to ensure that, you know, this 12-12 never connects face.
Yeah, there's a lot of options that Gur can choose here, but I feel like out of all the options, you just got to make sure that you don't fill up your board all the way. Like, it's probably not that impactful since you're a priest and you have mostly spells, but it's just good in order to, like, if you needed a Zyrella clear, if you needed to play that Alex Straza that's sitting in hand, I'd rather you have that option than to not. But again, I think that the person who is in trouble right now is definitely Orange, because he's gonna have to pop off a 30 damage combo in probably 2 turns with no card draw.
Yep. And I mean, there's always a threat that if a single one of these minions is able to attack face, that essentially just represents lethal damage. Windchill picked up not the worst draw. It allows you to freeze a minion and cycle. We're looking for Macaw, looking for Snowfall. Neither of them found there. I think at this point you just have to trade the overdraft and you're still looking for those same cards, just mass board freeze and hope that it buys you enough time to be able to combo.
Yeah, this is without Macaw, I just don't see how we get ourselves out of this situation. Wildpaw
Yep,
Caverns not pulling the weight that it usually does.
Yep. I can hear Orange internally cursing about why this card is in his deck. I know he's not the biggest fan of it out of everyone, and it's got to feel a little brutal to draw that one this turn when it is truly at its most useless.
It's just not.
But
I don't think there's anything
there's
to
just
really do here, right?
Yep, there's nothing to do. You just set up the Phoenix, you play your Cavern, and then you hope that you're not dead. I think that's all you can do. Unfortunately, this will surely be enough damage at this point. The Thrive in the Shadows plus the the Devour alone actually plus Bless is just lethal.
Yeah, so well played to Orange. I will go ahead and say that for someone who's been up 12 hours past their bedtime, I'm honestly very impressed with the line of plays that he made. And he really did take a lot of time to like think out some of these plays, so I wonder if it's kind of difficult to find some of these lines here. But unfortunately, Team Sweden is going to be taking the first loss of the rounds today. And it wasn't for lack of trying. Unfortunately, Priest just does what Priest does and just absolutely demolishes everything in its path if it has the combo ready by turn 5. Like, we literally saw the combo get built twice very, very consistently, and you got to feel for Orange there because he had a very strong start, but just not enough in order to clear out the beginning.
Yep, definitely. I think it was a really well-played series by both players, both teams. Gur's understanding as well as the rest of this team was definitely there on the Miracle Priest. I mean, even when you get those strong hands, you get the palm reading, you get the insight, whatever, you still need to know how to, go about the game and increase, your percentage points or how likely you are to turn that into a win. And I think they executed it pretty much flawlessly. So very well played.
Yeah, so we'll be getting the next lineup here in a second. Let me just go ahead and show you guys the lineups that we will be seeing for this next round. Here we go. So McBanter, do you want to take away these lineups for I'm gonna mispronounce this name a lot. Ostinato, I think is how you pronounce it, versus Chewy.
Yep. So Ostinato will be bringing the Garrote Rogue, the Beast Druid, and Face Hunter. And meanwhile, Chewy has Fel DH, Mozaki Mage, and a Face Hunter as well. And it looks like the bans for both of them, from Ostinato's side, the Garrote Rogue was banned, and Chewy's Fel DH was banned, meaning that we will have Beast Druid and Hunter against Mozaki Mage and Hunter. So another mirror, potentially, in the series.
You think it's going to come down to it again?
I mean, looking at the way that this matchup could play out, I do think it could very well come down to that. It's sort of like they both lineups have one matchup that's good and one matchup that's pretty bad. I'm not even sure who I would necessarily give the edge to here. To be honest, I think it would probably be whoever can win the Hunter mirror.
Oh man, what a classic classic matchup for tournaments is the good old-fashioned Hunter mirror. Who gets the face damage first? I mean, Hunter is just like really like, I wouldn't even go so far to say that it's that good. It's just one of the only responses to a lot of these deck archetypes that are just super fast combo. Like, it's just one of the only ways that you can make a Garrote Rogue or a Weapon Rogue just feel like they're under pressure, because that with the constant hero powers that they can't control. And it's just like, it's kind of sad to see that. I mean, for me that hates Face Hunter personally, it's sad to see that Face Hunter can only really thrive because it has to, if that makes any sense.
Sure. And yeah, I mean, Hunter, at least from the from Chewy's side, isn't necessarily at its strongest in this series, so you may be happy to see that if you're not a big Hunter fan. The Beast Druid has a pretty solid matchup into it, although it's definitely not as bad as I think some aggressive Druids versus Hunter in the past have been. And outside of that, it's just the mirror. So I think they're going to be looking potentially at their Mozaki Mage to try and get through the Druid and then maybe squeak out a win against Hunter.
Yeah, Like looking at this lineup, there isn't anything all too ridiculous outside of Chewy running the Tavish. By the way, the Beastalker Tavish. I have actually seen some people post lists on this, like with their success on ladder. I haven't seen anybody post anything too ridiculous, but just at first glance, do you think that the Tavish has any bearing on how this series could play out?
I actually think it could very well. Having a Tavish into two relatively aggressive decks, being able to pull out, an explosive trap when you're pretty far behind to maybe buy you some more time, or just, like an improved pack tactics if you have a couple minions on board, something like that. It could be quite relevant. In the mirror, I think in general, you're going to be looking at trying to, just snowball an early board, and Tavish will sometimes be too late, but I think it's definitely an interesting inclusion. However, I think I'd probably favor the Neophyte version, particularly because Ostinato does have the double Neophyte and is going into a mage lineup. I'm sure he'll be very happy to have those in his Hunter deck.
Yeah, so just taking one last look at Ostinato's lineup in case anybody missed it earlier. We do have Aggro Druid versus Hunter versus the Mozaki Mage versus the same Hunter. The Hunter only has one real major change, and that's the inclusion of Tavish. I'm not sure what gets taken out for it. But I think the biggest issue for Ostinato here is going to be getting this Druid through. Because in the Hunter matchup, it's definitely not that good. Well, in the Mage matchup, it's not that the matchup is bad. It's just the Mage has a lot of ways of being able to stall the Druid for a lot of time. And whenever you're playing the Druid, like whenever I play Druid, I seem to just lose against the against those style of decks. So I don't know if that's just me being unlucky or anything, but I don't know. Whenever I play Druid, whenever I played Aggro Druid this expansion, it always just feels like it's like one turn or one damage away from being able to close out the games. And because of that, it's got like a 49% win rate versus like a 51% win rate, Like it seems worse than it actually is, but I do believe that Ostinato is going to have to worry about this deck getting through versus his other deck.
Yeah, I mean, I do think I'd probably be more comfortable trying to get it through the Hunter rather than the Mage. I think the Mage would actually be a more difficult matchup. Although the way their deck is built, they've gone with the sort of, maybe not older build, but I guess it's actually just the most well-established build of Beast Druid, which does run cards like Speaker Gidra, Kazakis, and Guff, which are all, probably not cards that you necessarily want in this matchup. They're just a little bit slow, a little bit more late-game oriented. But they do have, a pretty solid hand here. Lunar Eclipse, always something you want against Hunter. And meanwhile, Chewy does not really have the start you're looking for as a Hunter player.
I mean, I would honestly somewhat disagree because, like, the True Aim Crescent, at least back in the day when you were running Razor Mains, Grey Bows, and, like, those 5-drop taunts, like, this weapon massively carried the Hunter's weakness of not being able to deal with their board. But when you look at the other side, Ostinato having absolutely nothing on turn 1 and not even like a coin turn 2, that's gotta feel bad.
Yeah, I mean, again, I look at this Hunter hand, I'm like, ugh. I think the biggest problem with it, even though you do have the Og Merchant and Remy mounts, which are absolutely a huge deal, I think it'd probably be something you'd maybe like more in older matchups against Druid. With this Druid deck, I've found that you actually don't even need to have board early on. You can kind of concede some early board and then go for a big swing turn with like Oracle into Matriarchs or Owls, and that's how you often end up winning. So for Chewy to not be able to have the chance to push any damage here, I think is a pretty rough start.
Yeah, like Chewy not having any early development definitely feels rough here, and like Ostinato does have a kind of awkward first couple of turns here, but you could argue that at least this Druid deck has ways of being able to play in the mid-late stages of the game, even after its board has been wiped. Hunter is almost the complete opposite, to where if you knock out its early game, it really struggles to put itself back onto the board. So if he's able to, if Team Korea is able to keep the Hunter's advantage off for another couple of turns, all it really needs is just like one really good Owl turn, one really good Frost Saber turn. Like, there's a lot of comeback ability in this Druid deck, which the Hunter deck just doesn't have access to.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, those late game board swings and kind of combo turns are pretty much the bread and butter of this druid. So picking up the Thorngrowth Sentries here is actually pretty huge. I mean, it's your best activator for Frostsaber Matriarch, as well as giving you a way to just deal with the board. They are instead going to opt for a more kind of aggressive play on board, play the Gidra, deal with this Divine Shield minion here, and can just always hold on to the Thorngrowth for later.
Yeah, the Gidra is going to put in so much work. And this is something that I kind of like about the card. I don't know if it's the best inclusion in aggro druid specifically. I've always kind of liked this whenever I'm playing like a more mid-range style that's not all in on like the ridiculous openers. But in this specific matchup, Gidra feels like the absolute nuts because now that the Hunter had absolutely no meaningful early game, its mid game is just going to be chipped away bit by bit. But the ramming mount does help, you know, Chewie come back in the situation to where now he's the one that's going to be able to rule the early game, and maybe now that the Druid is off the board for another turn, maybe set up this Tavish more meaningfully.
Yep, I mean, the Tavish pickup is definitely interesting. It's probably not the worst card to draw on this stage because you do kind of need to have some sort of late game because really for Hunter, having your opponent at 24 at this stage, you pretty much are in the late game. You definitely want them to be, you know, at 15 by now, pushing that early damage. They just haven't had it. The ramming mount definitely helps out with the board control, but again, the damage pushing is kind of the bigger issue, which is why I like the play they made to just push the 4 face. They could have gone for a full clear there and traded 4 in, but at that point, I mean, you're just pretty much never killing your opponent. So they went for the more aggressive line. Meanwhile, Alcinato does end up clearing everything off the board, developing a little bit of his own, and Chewie's kind of back to square one.
Yeah, so unfortunately here for Chewie, it seems like the board is already lost. You have the Tavish to maybe get you that that explosive trap that you were talking about at the preparation, where maybe like Tavish is able to get a bunch of damage to like the secrets. Like if you get an explosive trap, you can stop their board. But I'm wondering, based off of like how much gas the Hunter has available to them right now, if they're even gonna be able to make it over the next couple of turns. Because like with one draw every single turn, versus the Druid who has an entire hand to kind of do what they want, and now is that a Guff that I see? I didn't even see Guff in the list.
That is a Guff off the top. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a more kind of late game oriented build, and that draw is huge. I mean, having the Oracle in hand at this stage, you're pretty much, I mean, as soon as next turn, actually, you can more or less, you know, I'm not going to say completely end the game, but that is a pretty huge board that can come down next turn with Oracle, and then to copy the Druid of the Reef and the Cubs, you can also play the Matriarch for 0.
Yeah, so Chewie really does have the match cut out for him. He's going to have to, honestly, I just feel like this is the only time that you're going to be able to play the Tavish and not regret it. Like, Barak is also a pretty good play if you want to go for, like, the amount of damage that you'll probably need in order to solidify this game. Decent amount of damage to these cards. It really just depends on what we get off of this Demon Companion, but we do get a decent amount of damage.
Always helpful. Yeah, I like this decision a lot to go for the Brock. I think the big problem is, especially seeing your opponent draw Guff there, the Tavish just doesn't do enough at that stage, and you will need to try and kill them over the top. So I think it's very sensible to go for the damage spells, and they'll likely attempt to play this aim shot before they change their hero power. Whether that's actually a possibility or not, having seen this play, is a different story.
Yeah, so if I remember correctly, the improved explosive trap deals 4?
3.
Deals 3. Okay, deals 3. So it doesn't even deal with the Oracle Balloon, so that's already not doing Chewie a whole bunch of favors here.
Yeah, and I mean, even another big issue is that you can essentially just do nothing as the Druid because you have so much health right now, and just set up for an Arbor Up play to get your board, you know, out of range and end up like pushing lethal by the time you push through the secret.
This just feels really difficult for Chewie to be able to get past this. Like, Hunter just doesn't have the comeback tools available. And I've been saying that most of this match is that its power really does rely on its early curve, and there was almost no early curve. Like, I know that I said that the True Aim Crescent is really, really helpful in the Druid matchup, but there was a point that you made to where this deck doesn't play like it used to back in the day, where you're just all focused on just stealing the board and then just winning with Arbor up. The amount of boards that this deck can generate is legitimately scary for an aggro deck.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the even scarier part is they don't even need to generate all those boards. This one is pretty much enough because the Warsong Wrangler pickup is, you know, nice, at least in theory, for Chewy. It gives them another line here where they can start to try and chip that damage together with the help of a Rhino and saving this weapon swing. The problem they're going to run into is that they will be dead before then. I think this is the only play you can reasonably make, and just hope your opponent doesn't really have like the 2-turn setup here. But with the Arbor up, I think we will see the game coming to a close sooner than they would have liked.
Yeah, and this is where I was questioning the inclusion of the Tavish, because, like, unfortunately in this matchup, it just really didn't help us. But I feel like it's not necessarily Tavish's fault. Maybe if we had, like, early game to, you know, kind of help supplement the time before we played Tavish, it would have been much more impactful. But unfortunately,
Definitely.
This is not a game where you want to see Tavish in your hand.
Yep. You definitely need the early board as well. So, you know, an opening hand of a weapon and an Aug Merchant, not what you're looking for. And Alcinato picks up an extra copy of this Druid of the Reef here. Going to allow them to completely clear the board, drop a Matriarch, and set up the Arbor up for a pretty simple 2-turn lethal setup.
Stop, he's already dead.
Yeah, and I mean, Tavish will deal with some of this board, but unfortunately, I don't think it quite does enough to get them out of range here.
Not gonna deal with enough of the board, unfortunately. Like,
Yep.
This is why when Tavish was printed, I was just so confused at what exactly he's supposed to fit in. Maybe there's like a card in the next expansion that'll really make this card shine. And I thought that like the inclusion of him in like Spell Hunter would be absolutely catastrophic. But unfortunately, Tavish just hasn't found a home yet. He's roaming the streets, wandering with his 3 pets that he can't even, you know, choose by himself. And it's just sad.
Yep, and so I mean, they're going to try and pick the most defensive secrets here that allow them a way to stay alive. Unfortunately, I don't think that they quite end up getting there. They do go up to 18 HP. So, I mean, what you can do here is, well, if they get the explosive here, they can quick shot a 6/6, meaning that they would be just about alive on board. No real way to win from there, but you got to try, right?
I will say this: there is one thing that I've learned about Tavish while casting this match. Apparently, when you play him, he has like a little bit of dust that shoots out of his rifle. So I just have to give creds to that animation. So at least Tavish is visually appealing, which is about all he's good for these days.
Good to know. And they do make, I think, a very smart play there. They didn't hit the explosive off of the secrets, but they have to essentially bluff it or they're dead on board. So Chewy quick shots the Matriarch there. The Adorable does put it over that breakpoint though, so that is the game 1 for Ostinato.
Hey Banter, do you remember that one thing that I said that I was scared of happening that happened last time?
I do remember that. But we still got a long series ahead of us potentially. With the Druid getting through, it does mean that Chewy will have to sweep on the Mozaki Mage, which means beating that Druid that we just saw, as well as the Face Hunter.
Yeah, let's hope that that Team Sweden is going to be able to reverse sweep it here so we can keep this broadcast going. But luckily for Ostinato, he does get to keep the Druid, and this is kind of like what I was talking about earlier, where like sometimes the Druid versus Mage matchup isn't the greatest for the Druid. For this particular list, it's a little bit more up in the air because of how high curved the mana cost of the deck is. But what do you think? Do you think that this is hand in the bag for the Druid because it's supposed to be the aggro deck against the combo deck? Or do you feel like Mozaki is Mozaki and we can never predict this deck, and no matter how many nerfs we do to it, it's just not going to make a difference?
I mean, I think that historically it's been pretty strong against Beast Druid. This version of Beast Druid does have, I think, more ways to win a matchup like this, particularly because older versions of, you know, more aggressive Druids, or maybe 3 months ago, a lot of your minions kind of capped out at 3 health, which means that Fire Sale is pretty brutal.
Yeah.
But now when you're able to make, you know, a board of Matriarchs, get 4 4/5s on board, you can potentially set up boards to actually live through that.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really good point that you just made there. That really just solidifies how this matchup feels to the Druid players. That back then, like especially when I was playing aggro Druid, like you just got absolutely destroyed if they had the Fire Sale combo. But now that you have minions that are around 4 or 5 HP usually, suddenly Fire Sale doesn't become that much of a problem unless you combo it with spell damage.
Yep, definitely. And some pretty decent hands for both players here. Ostinato starting off with a, just a 1-drop, as well as the Kennels to play on turn 3, followed by a Composting to get you some resources. Meanwhile, Chewy's got the blue card. What more could you want?
Another blue card?
That is, you probably do want to, yeah. I will always take 2. But they'll have to do with the 1 for now. I mean, having the Fire Sale in hand, I think, is something that's going to be pretty appealing as well. You do have the option to trade it on this turn if you're looking for something else. I would definitely opt to hold on to it. In this kind of matchup, especially when your opponent plays stuff like Thorngrove Sentries, Kennels, I don't really see any big reason to trade it here.
Yeah, let's just hope that Chewy's been taking a lot of notes in Aveline stream, because I don't think I can list anybody else who's had more games of Mozaki Rogue than Aveline. And even like with all of the nerfs that this deck has experienced, like it just really I don't want to say that it didn't make a difference, because it did make a difference. Like you can't OTK on turn 5 anymore, which I don't think you can. I don't think that's possible. But like this deck is just so insane, and it really it feels amazing. At least when you just like look at it on paper, that a combo deck can keep toe to toe with some of these aggro decks that we're experiencing in this meta right now. But it's almost like the combo decks have become the aggro decks themselves this expansion.
And interesting choice from Ostinato on that turn. The Moonlit into pretty much 2 real options, either the Druid of the Reef or the Nature Studies, potentially pick up some extra value. Oh. I think I definitely prefer the Druid of the Reef. Siphon Mana is a pretty huge pickup though for Chewy. Meanwhile, Ostinato's game plan at this point looks pretty clear. Going to be something along the lines of setting up a composting and then trying to have a big Oracle turn. But that is still, a few turns away. And meanwhile, Chewy's going to have basically a free turn to coin the Encounter's Flow.
Yeah, part of me was wondering if you ever play the Oracle of Valoon just to try and prevent like a potential coin into Encounter's Flow. But the issue with doing that is not only are you playing into the Siphon Mana that Chewy just found randomly, but as the Druid, you are giving yourself literally 0 value, and you're pretty much banking on your opponent to have the worst case scenario, versus just going with this play, which seems infinitely better.
Absolutely, and I mean, I can hardly think of a mage hand that can't clear an Oracle on that turn. You'd have to have a very, very specific hand, so I definitely like holding on to it and just kind of hope, you just don't have much of a choice, just hope they don't have the flow. Bad news for Ostinato, there is a flow here, but the Lightning Bloom pickup actually from the studies is a pretty big deal. It means that they can go in with the Oracle this turn to make a board and land the composting a lot earlier than maybe they would have expected, meaning that they can start to chain some resources together and try to find some more buffs or damage to stick on board.
And suddenly the Fire Sale that's in Chewy's hand right now gives Ostinato 4 card draw. So Team Korea's definitely got to be very happy with that top deck. Because if it...
Sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, not only that, the Fire Sale doesn't clear the Oracle, which is by far the most important minion on this turn. So, I mean, if I'm in Chewy's position here, I'd be looking at a way to deal with the Oracle and maybe minimize some of this damage rather than using the Fire Sale. You're also not worried about an Arbor up next turn because they are overloaded. So I think killing the Oracle is definitely the priority here.
Ah, that's a good point. The overload was something I did not consider, and I was about to be like something Arbor up, but yeah, that definitely that made me feel like a 4-head caster. But regardless, like Chewy does have the mana discount that's coming from the Siphon Soul if he does choose to play it this turn. So he does have other minions that he could clear if he wanted to. I'm wondering how badly he feels like he needs to.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, I think there's actually very little reason to use resources to deal with the board because your opponent is just going to draw off them. There's already a composting played, so leaving them on board is not really a huge deal. And saving some stuff for later is good.
What do you think about him not playing the Siphon Mana? Like, saving it for future turns might be necessary for like combo purposes, but don't we just kind of need the mana sheet right now since we're falling behind on board?
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's necessarily saving it for like a combo or anything. I think it's more just sort of the efficiency of pinging there because you do only have, so much removal in your hand. so that weaving in the ping took off just as much damage on the board as the Siphon mana did. And you also don't actually have like that much stuff to spend mana on in this hand, right? There's not a ton of card draw, so I think it's very reasonable to just weave in the ping there, and then maybe on the next turn or one of these upcoming turns they can get the Siphon mana down. But card draw is the big problem, right? They're clearing this board, but Ostinato was able to land that that early composting. Meanwhile, Chewy's got, you know, soon to be 2 Incanter's Flows, but really needs to find the card draw to stay in this game.
And this is what I was kind of talking about, where like this deck was nerfed, and as much as I want to say that the nerf doesn't matter, a 4-mana Incanter's Flow is part of the reason why Chewy isn't really that ahead on this game right now. Like, imagine if you were to coin it out on turn 2. That's one whole turn that he could have spent to hopefully finding more ways to remove the minions that were played, and just like the 4-mana Incanter's Flow nerf really did matter. And hopefully this game was able to convince you. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
Yeah, and I mean, this turn is a monstrous turn from Ostinato. The Heart of the Wild picked up. These nature studies have been really strong. It's a potential buff they can get on top of this board, which is all beasts. So they make a huge board here, which is already very, very hard to deal with. And if any of it sticks, they can get some extra damage off the Heart of the Wild.
Oh man, we've got no card draw.
Yeah, I
have to find a clear with what's in hand right now, or some way not to die. Chewy's face says it all right now, man. I don't know if you've got the access to his camera, but he just does not look happy. Ponder. I wouldn't be happy to either, Chewy. So I feel for you, buddy. I've had my fair share of games against Mozaki Mage, and this is just kind of how it feels sometimes. You either get blown out by the gigantic combo, or you're just sitting here just messing with sticks until maybe something catches fire.
Yep, and I mean, they've got a flurry in hand and the hope of chaining cards back to back next turn, but other than that, just not a lot going on here, and they're just going to remove as much of the board as they can and try to make sure they're not dead on board.
Hopefully this really freezes the 6/6s. Really necessary that it freezes those. Alright, got one of them. But how much damage is available here? 10? Oh, that's just
15.
enough.
It's not quite enough because it only buffs, or I think it's either 1 or 2 off, right?
Yeah, because it's a +2 plus another 1, since there's only one minion that's unfrozen and gets the buff and can attack. So Chewy's got one more turn to maybe find something, and oh no. The hot streak of top decks has failed us so badly.
Cram for 1, looking for Spring Water. Okay. Spring Water is found, so that's a good start. But we're gonna need a whole lot more here.
Gonna need like Fire Sail, gonna need a lot of removal. The Incanter's Flow is really making a difference.
The Arcane Intellect is huge. I mean, this is doable all of a sudden, right? With double flow, if they can find a clear here, Ostinato has absolutely nothing in hand.
Okay, so we can play Fire Sail for 0. We got another hot streak with Combustion.
Combustion is interesting. The problem is there is a lot of health on board. I'm not even sure if you have enough mana to make it work.
You have an Ignite to maybe make the Combustion a little bit easier to remove here, like. But they're at 7 HP. Yeah, there's just no way that can happen. So you, the clock is on, HP. Man. We gotta find our freeze cards.
I've heard of it.
Okay.
A double studies is found. Oh, and this is enough to actually clear, or at the very least stay alive on this board. They can go ahead and just flurry here, and there is 0 damage being pushed, other than maybe 1 from the hero power, which does still give them some potential outs on the next turn.
There's no nature studies available in the deck. Both have already been played, so I don't think there's any random outs that can happen here. Yeah, this is just pass, play minions, hope that they don't remove it again. But Chewy is like on his last leg here. He needs to hit like another refreshing Spring Water. He has another AI in the deck. I think that and a Cramp Session are really the only card draw tools. Oh wait, a second Multicaster
is huge, but there is still this problem that he's at 2 HP, which means he needs to end this game within 2 turns, or I don't even think there's no ways left to generate a an ice barrier. So he's on a 2-turn clock. Mozaki is picked up, but there's just not enough removal.
Maybe get a tradable. Okay, there we go. There we go. Okay. Like, you have to just trade the Guild Trader. I don't know what else to do. Wait, whoa, randomly discovering? What could we discover for 2 mana? Okay. If we 1 mana less, so you can still discover some for 3. You have 2 more mana out of the Conjurer's mana biscuit.
Flurry potentially.
Okay.
They do hit a flurry, and they can actually once again miraculously stay alive on board here, but they are forced to use so many of these resources.
Oh my
they
God.
have to commit the biscuit.
You gotta risk it for the biscuit.
Yeah, but again, the problem that remains is, you know, they did incredibly well to stay alive here because it's all they can do, but how can you possibly get a lethal on the next turn?
Cram Session is a hell of a card. But even then, like, you get maybe... Okay, so you get 2 draws, 1 from your natural draw, 1 from the Blood Mage. You are really gonna need to hit the absolute gas right now.
Well, we got a Thalnos, 1 draw.
And we got a Mozaki with a dream.
A Mozaki and a dream. They're looking for Springwater or Arcane Intellect, or Cram Session, off of this draw, and they need to kill their opponents here.
Yeah, like, I was about to be like, oh, we can keep the Mozaki on the field, but that's not going to make any difference whatsoever. And unfortunately, that draw is not going to be good enough. A Hero Power is more than enough from Team South Korea in order to take the 2-0 sweep. I didn't want this to happen again, man. I gave them the caster curse. That's what happened.
That has got to feel
poor Chewy.
like a pretty brutal ending for Team Sweden in this set. I mean, they got so close and yet so far, just forced to use all these resources to clear some boards that I think are pretty unlikely to be made at the stages of the game where they were. The Lightning Bloom pickup was huge, and Alcinado does sweep with the Druid.
Yeah, that's gotta definitely bite Team Sweden a little bit here after having like almost like a very strong couple of first games to where like Orange looked like he was about to take a 2-0 lead, but then suddenly the reverse sweep happened, and now in this matchup the Hunter was just completely blown away, and the aggro Druid was just absolutely dominant the entire time. I don't think we saw one bad turn from the Druid except for like no turn 1.
Yeah, I mean, in pretty much all those, you know, both the Druid games, both the Priest games, really strong draws, as well as, you know, a good fundamental understanding of how to take advantage of those tools, I think was shown by Gert and Ostinato, as well as their entire team. So I think it was, you know, a very well played series. I'm sure they'll be pleased with that one to have that done, kind of, and not, you know, going all the way to game 3 or set 3. So well played.
All right, let me see if I can get him in for an interview real quick. Fortunately, we couldn't get his camera, but let me see if I can get him into an interview real quick. Do you have any last comments about how that series went, outside of the fact that we might need to nerf Mozaki Mage just one more time?
Yeah, I mean, I wish that I got to see a bit more. It definitely went by pretty quick, but I think it was, you know, a very high level of play throughout the series, which is always, you know, what we're hoping to see here. Not any, you know, glaring errors or big mistakes that we could see in those games. Kind of just clean gameplay and, you know, taking, you know, I guess the full advantage of, you know, what their decks can do.
Yeah, I kind of feel bad for Chewy there because I wanted a reason for Tavish to be a card that I wasn't gonna make fun of, and then have, you know, like I wanted to make fun of the card, have the card be busted, and then suddenly I look like the idiot. Like that's always the best thing whenever the caster gets their just desserts, but unfortunately Tavish just wasn't enough to do enough. And the Mozaki game was honestly a lot more close than I was originally going to think, just due to the fact that like I would have given up 3 turns before Chewy did, where it's like, I already know how this game is gonna go, but until that last turn, until that last Ignite was drawn, there was actually hope, and that's just, that makes me reevaluate how I look at Mozaki sometimes, but the frustration aspect is still something I will struggle with.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, that's in those sets that you're kind of, you know, it feels like everything's going against you. That's kind of all you can do at some point, is make the best plays that you can, find the ways to stay alive and try to give yourself a win condition. Unfortunately, for Chewy in that game, it didn't quite pan out, but definitely a hard-fought battle in that one.
Yeah, so I have not received word back from Asinato in the last series, so let's just go ahead and like go through the rest of this, and if I hear back from him before the stream ends, I will wait. He's replying back. Let me give him some time to get a yes or no question, or yes or no answer. Yes or no question is, yeah. I've clearly had a long day today, guys. But yeah, McBanter, was this your first cast with Mac's team after having a pretty solid competitive series?
It was, yeah. I really enjoyed it as well. I mean, again, I wish that we got to get all the full set there, but at least it was some entertaining games, and hopefully I'll be back for more at some point.
Yeah, hopefully we'll let America's rule over the competition next time. Like I gotta say, I was watching America's last week, and it was very, very rough to see my own country get tar and tathered.
Yeah, we had some rough games in this competition, but I'm sure we'll be back for the next one.
Yeah, he's still typing, by the way. This entire time I've been looking at this, and okay, he's saying that it's morning in Korea and he has something to do now. So we'll go ahead and get out of your guys' hair. Thank you guys so much for chilling with us today. Let me go ahead and give a recap of what to expect for the rest of the next couple of weeks for Max Gaming. At the very beginning, I did say that the mini set is going to disrupt the next week of competition. So these dates are going to be pushed back one whole week. So instead of the 14th to the 20th, we're going to be doing the 21st to the 26th. So hopefully you guys can keep up to date with all the updates that happen, not only on Twitter but in the Discord. Make sure that you join that Discord, because that's pretty much where this entire league keeps itself, and where everyone is in contact with each other. McBanter, would you like to say anything else before we close the stream today?
Not too much to say. Thanks for having me again. Appreciate it, and I hope I'll be back to watch some more great games in the future.
Yeah, dude, it's always a pleasure casting with you and doing production with you, and it's always a pleasure to be in front of everyone's eyes who is currently watching this. So thank you guys so much for watching Max League of Nations #2. We'll see you guys in 2 weeks' time in order to give our players enough time to practice for the mini set. There's a Masters Tour between that, which we're obviously going to just force our Masters Tour competitors to figure out the meta on the very first day. But we got plenty of Hearthstone action coming after those events are done and set for. So thank you guys so much for watching Max League of Nations #2. We'll see you guys in 2 weeks' time. My name has been Clark Hellscream. I've been accompanied by McBanterFace, and we'll see you next time.